Well, hello again, everybody. Welcome into the Color Gemstone Academy. I am your instructor, Paul Deasy, and this is my YouTube channel, Paul Deasy Gemstones, which is very convenient because that is my name. Anyway, before we get started this week on I think we're up to our Q&A series, episode 16, and this is where I answer all of the questions and comments that you have, and I really love doing this portion of our shows because it's us having a dialogue back and forth of some of your most frequently asked questions, and sometimes you just want to say, I like the lessons, and I appreciate that too. But before we get started, I wanted to mention that you might see, whether you're watching these lessons or where the gem lessons or my upcoming playlist will be In the Kitchen with Paul and Judy. No matter what you're watching, you might see some ads that will pop up on your screen. Most of them are going to be skippable ads. I made them skippable, so if you want to just skip them after a few seconds, you can. However, if you do see something that interests you, or maybe you want to watch it, or maybe you buy something from them, that's great. I don't need you to do that, but by me allowing those ads, I can continue to do these lessons for you completely for free. And don't forget to subscribe. Remember, subscribe says subscribe, but it doesn't cost you anything. It's completely free. And if you want to hit the like button or share a video, you can do that as well. All right, so as I mentioned, this is now episode 16 in our Q&A series. And I have my handy computer here because I'm writing all your questions down on my computer so that I can read them and not forget who it was that sent it in to me. Okay, so the first one will be from a subscriber by the name of OVH, and this is from episode 44, which was the ametrine lesson, and says, I flipped out the first time I saw an ametrine. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Well, I completely agree. It's a marvelous, beautiful gemstone. I remember the very first time I showed it was probably in the late 80s or early 90s. I was always amazed that you could have part amethyst and part citrine in one single gem, and it's absolutely relatively affordable still to this day for a bi-color gemstone. So thank you, OVH, for that question, or actually really just that comment. Next we have Anna Villo, looked like there's a accent on that, and asks, it is, meaning ametrine, it is a beautiful gem. Does ametrine fade from sunshine just like an amethyst, though? Well, that's a great question. And my answer is kind of, sort of, but not really that much. So there are certain gems that are sensitive to light and heat. Remember, we talk about how they react to light, heat, and chemicals. And when we think of something like a kunzite, it can really fade quite prominently if you wear it for prolonged times in natural sunlight. So they call that an evening gem to wear. I would not put ametrine in that same category. Certainly, if you had an amethyst geode or an ametrine geode or an ametrine ring or an amethyst, and it's sitting on your, say, your kitchen counter where the sunlight can stream on it and bake it all day long, I wouldn't recommend that. I would not purposely put it in prolonged exposure to sunlight. That said, it's not going to be as affected as some other stones that are much, much more vulnerable. And the truth of the matter is, even when you're out, when we went to the amethyst mines in Brazil, and we saw them treating the amethyst, it wasn't really quite the color that they wanted. They put it into an oven and they heat treat it, because heat-treated amethyst becomes citrine. So again, I would not worry too much about wearing your ametrine. Just be smart about it. Don't put it in your oven. Don't leave it to a prolonged exposure to really intense sunlight, and you should be just fine. So thank you, and that was Anna. Okay, Tommy Lynch, one of my collectors in this, he says from episode 59 Larimar, he says, I'm late, because we do the gem lessons every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. He says, I'm late. Then he goes on to say, I own a few pieces of Larimar. I have to say it is a fascinating blue, and the price just keeps going up. I totally agree. I think that Larimar is one of those really, really best kept secrets. And the supply, it's pretty scarce. So it's not a lot of it in the world, but the demand remains steady. So supply and demand, the prices are going to go up. But it's still a relatively affordable gemstone. And as another aside, it is trending as the #1 gem lesson video that we've ever done to date. So a lot of people are still in love with that Larimar. Thank you so much, Tommy. Always good to hear from you. The next one, I don't know. I'm not sure of the name. No, it's not I'm not sure of the name. I absolutely don't know the name, because the name, I don't know if you know this, but YouTube is worldwide. So we have people that are watching from China and from India and from Pakistan and all these other places. And it translates the lessons so that they can understand what we are saying. But the name was basically, by the way, I don't know if it's Chinese or Korean or Japanese, but it was an Asian character. So I don't know what your name is, so I apologize. This was also for episode 59. And he or she says, thank you, first time heard of the stone, got educated. Well, that's what I'm here for. I want to be the biggest free weekly gem classes on YouTube. So I'll be happy if you have some requests to get whatever it is that you don't know. But always check that playlist, because I have a lot of gem lessons that are on there. Another familiar name is Sis Miller, also from Larimar episode 59. Oh my, that is a beautiful stone. It is my favorite color. Well, I totally agree with you. Blue has always been my favorite color. And certainly in gemstones, it's no exception. And I love my opaques in the turquoise. But there's really something magical about that intense blue, which is not like any other blue when you really think about it. But also the fact that many of the specimens that I have are actually translucent, so light will pass through that stone. So thank you very much, sis. Great to hear from you. The next one is a new name to me. And it's Wander Woman, not Wonder Woman, Wander Woman. So I don't know, either maybe she has a Jeep that she drives, or she just likes to wander. And she makes a comment also on the Larimar episode 59. Thanks, the beauty of Creator is wonderful to behold. And I couldn't agree more. For all that we like to do and think that we create, we've only been on this earth a very short period of time as humans. And what's created by Mother Nature and our Creator, we cannot even dream to do. And by the way, there's many probably more undiscovered gems we don't even know about. But Larimar certainly is one of the beauties out there. Okay, so next we go, also a Larimar question. I told you it's our most popular trending one right now. Rebecca K says, thank you, Paul. My pleasure, Rebecca. I'm glad that you enjoy the lessons, and I will keep them coming as long as you're there to watch them with me. Okay. The next question. Wait, I'm going to check my time to see if I have time for this. Okay, so I just did a quick check, and we're probably close to 8 or 9 minutes into this lesson. And this next one is a great question, but it's going to take, it's a real involved answer. So this will be the last lesson for this week, and then we'll pick it up again next week. Okay, so Dash Overton from Q&A episode 15, which was last week's. Oh, and by the way, happy Cinco de Mayo. Today happens to be Cinco de Mayo. Not when I'm taping, but when you're going to see this. Anyway, so Dash Overton from Q&A episode 15 says, is natural gem grade turquoise jewelry a good investment? And this is quite a fantastic question. And especially the way that you specifically asked the question, is natural gem grade turquoise jewelry a good investment? Well, let me tell you, first of all, in my 30 years of selling gemstones on shopping channels, I never talked about any piece of jewelry with gemstones being an investment. Jewelry is meant to be worn and enjoyed. I'll talk about some of my personal collection in a little bit. But just like every time I give you a gem lesson, I talk about the Mohs scale of hardness. And that Mohs scale of hardness literally is a scale that says what gems will scratch another gem. So jewelry, I never think of as that investment. I think of an investment piece might be you got a D-color flawless diamond or a great specimen of turquoise that you don't wear. So it doesn't scratch, doesn't hit against another gem. When I took my first lesson in gemstones about 30 years ago, and it happened to be taught by one of the first female gemologists in the GIA, a graduate gemologist. And it was at the University of South Florida. And of course, I told this story before. I went there expecting to be bored out of my mind. It was the most fascinating lesson. And she actually, before she became a graduate gemologist, she worked for a jewelry store, I want to say somewhere in Ohio, for many, many years, like probably 20 years. And one of the things she did at this jewelry store, she was not the owner of the store, she worked there. They had all these precious gems, rubies, sapphires, emeralds, diamonds, and she had some samples of loose stones, and every day she would make like a display for the window when people are walking by the jewelry store. Like for example, on the 4th of July, it might have been the gems arranged in the Stars and Stripes, the United States flag. So you had the white, maybe it was white sapphire, maybe it was topaz, maybe it was even quartz. Then you had the rubies, and the red and white for the flag. Then you had blue, you had the sapphires. And she did this for years and years and years and years. And every day would be it had to take hours to do these things. But every day was a different theme using different colored gemstones. But these were specific gemstones that were earmarked for doing those displays. So she asked our class, and we were all pretty new in gems at that time. So what do you think when he, after years and years of doing this, and the owner decided to retire and shut down the business, what do you think all of those precious gemstones were worth? And we're all thinking, well, it had to be worth a bloody fortune. And she said, no, they were virtually worthless, because every day, taking them out there, placing them, hitting other gems, and then taking them back and putting them in a box, and then doing that year after year after year, day after day after day. Well, what have I always said? Your gems, if you don't take care of them, they are scratching each other. That's why she said they were virtually useless or worthless at the end of that time. So the same thing is why I say don't consider your jewelry as an investment piece. I'll tell you another story. And there's another friend of mine that I met many, many years ago through that instructor, ironically, because she told me that there was a friend of hers that was trying to get his gem collection on a shopping channel, which happened to be Home Shopping Club at that time, where I happened to be a host. And so I said, well, you can give him my number. I'm not going to ask to get somebody else's number, and he can contact me, and I would happily talk to him. So I went to meet him at a restaurant, during the lunch rush, and he came in. It was almost like it felt like a drug deal. He had these cases, and he says, let's sit somewhere where nobody can see us. And he opened it up, and he showed me some gorgeous garnets and just beautiful gemstones, and it was really amazing. And he talked about some of the difficulties he had getting them into a shopping channel. But as I got to learn more about him, we became very good friends over the years. And he told me that he was a contractor by trade who built strip malls, where you have independent stores. And he said after a while, it was like every strip mall that was ever built seemed to be built, and that business started to dry up. So he decided to sell his business, and he made good money on selling his business, and then he didn't know what he was going to do for his money investments and to grow. And he said, so I bounced around for a couple of years trying to figure out what I was going to do. And he said, I narrowed it down to two choices. It was either going to be collectible art or it was going to be gemstones. And he said, I chose the gemstones. And I said, Why? You mean you had no background? No. He said that, I learned how to facet, I did all these things, but I knew nothing about them before. He said, I chose gemstones because art requires a lot of money and maintenance to keep it looking like it is. If it's exposed, you can't just put it in a storage unit that's not climate controlled, because if it gets exposed to heat or humidity, you can ruin that art and it's worthless. He said, gems, they've been around for billions of years. They could be sitting in my driveway. They could be sitting in a bucket in my garage. They've been around for a billion years. They're not going to spoil. And I thought, well, that's really pretty brilliant. Okay, now I know it's been a long-winded answer, and I said that it involved a lot of things, especially since you asked about gem grade natural turquoise jewelry as a collector's item or as a good investment. So here's what I have to say on that subject. As I said, I own a lot of gemstones and jewelry. The ones I'm wearing in jewelry, I'm not thinking of those as an investment. I love my cufflinks that are opals, Australian opals. One of the first things I ever had made myself. And I have a couple of years back in the Tucson Gem Show, I bought a white buffalo bolo tie. Love that. I wear it. I'm not expecting that to gain in value because I'm wearing it. They become damaged if I hit my hand on a table. You know how that goes. However, gem grade turquoise that's natural is very rare. And I've always told people over the years, most turquoise these days is stabilized in one way, shape, or form. And so most of the gem miners I've talked to said that number in these days is probably in that 95 to 98%. All the turquoise that's mined in the world ends up becoming stabilized, meaning infused with the polymer to keep it from changing color by filling those open pores. However, if you're going to have a piece that you want to hold on to for years, will it rise in value? Probably, because there's always less and less more of that natural turquoise out there. That said, there's some other funny stories along the way. For example, a couple of years back, I had access to the original number 8 turquoise mine. Actually, the mine's been closed for close to 50 years, but there were only three people in the world that were authorized to sell the actual material that came from that mine. And I happen to know all of them. So I was selling it on, I guess it was Shop NBC or Shop HQ at the time, and everything I had sold out. It was just a spectacular value. Now here's the cautionary tale even about something like number 8 turquoise or even something like Bisbee turquoise. You always run the risk of weird things happening, even if you're expecting to hold on to something for years. For example, let's go back to the number 8 turquoise, which is beautiful. Well, there was some sort of dispute between these three people that were the only ones authorized to sell from the original owner's stash of that number 8 turquoise. So it was on hold. So nobody could sell it because we couldn't buy any more from them because that was part of the agreement as they were having litigation. So of course, that number 8 went up in value. Well, then that dispute got settled and they all had their own stash of what they were allowed to sell. And the rumors started to fly and circulate that they were all going to be rushing to the market, competing with each other at the same time, which means the price would probably drop. Again, supply and demand. Now you have a bunch of guys that have held on to supply for years and years and years, including through that dispute. Now they want to get their money out of it, so it's kind of good for the buyer, not necessarily good for the seller. And then another thing happened, interestingly. Most of you met my friend Tom Elliott, who was one of the few graduate jeweler gemologists in the world. And he was talking to some of the miners in Mexico with turquoise, and they started to pull out materials in a mine in Mexico that looked an awful lot like number 8, but at a fraction of the price. Now, had I got my hands on that material, I would not have sold it as number 8. I would say this comes from a Mexican mine. It looks very similar, some of the same characteristics of what you get out of number 8. But that, of course, even if you bought a bunch of number 8 in the rough, and you were expecting that to be a big investment, and all of a sudden another mine is discovered, and it happens all the time, that can at least temporarily depress the market in what you think is your investment stone. Well, I hope that answers all of your questions today. I know the last one was a little bit long-winded. We'll get to more of your questions next week. Keep those questions coming. I love it. I'll answer them as best I can. I may not be able to get to all of them, but I'm going to keep trying. So thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, if you have not done so yet, please hit that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you a penny. It's absolutely free. But it allows me to do things like I told you about the ads that you can skip if you don't want to watch them, so that I can continue to give you all these lessons for free. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next week, everybody. Thank you.